Sorry. All right. Oh, that's important. All right. What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we are here with By the Thousands. It is great to have you both here. Thank you so much, John and Dustin, for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having us, Alex.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you here. The Descent is the latest EP that we're getting from By the Thousands. Now, with this, I've always said that EPs are kind of like the side quests if we're using video game references in a band's catalog. Is this meant to almost serve as sort of like a turning point to what like a follow up to Dead Matter is going to sound like? I believe that was your last full length album. So is this meant to be kind of like a preview of what a follow up to Dead Matter is going to sound like? Is this sort of like a standalone thing in the By the Thousands catalog? What does this sort of EP signify, if I can make the question any longer?
Well, I think this one was really just like a hey, we're still here and we're hitting it really hard right now.
Yep. Was there at all? Oh, go on.
No. Just I like your analogy of a side quest because that really did like kind of feel like it was the prologue side quest to like a new mission, I guess, for BTT.
So is it fair to say that you're not just going to make a continuation of what we heard off of the last full length album, Dead Matter, is more or less going to be kind of like a new beginning, or you're going to be stepping into more uncharted territory in the future?
Yeah, correct.
Was there at all sort of like forethought behind that, or was there sort of like a vision in mind that you're going for?
I think like we always try to keep it in the same lane with By the Thousands and the way it sounds. And Dead Matter, we felt like was a really heavy record. It was the second album that we used with 8-string guitars. And, we did want to stay kind of in the same vein with this EP, staying with like the heavy stuff that people want to like listen to and have fun listening to live, while also kind of keeping it like a little techy and riffy and melodic too. Like all three of those things are something By the Thousands has had from the beginning.
Yeah, I've noticed like I was told that your inspirations include bands like Tesseract or Veil of Maya and bands along those sides, but you also like bands as heavy as like Lamb of God or like After the Burial. So was that was always the vision behind By the Thousands, was to kind of like combine those different types of influences together?
Yeah, exactly. Melodic, technical, groovy, heavy.
When it comes to like the making of an album, we talked about if there's a vision in mind, just usually start off with guitar work, or because I've noticed that a lot of bands that you have cited as your influences often take the concept album route. So do you also, is there maybe like a concept that you write your music circulating around?
I mean, this last one wasn't really a concept album. It might as well have been because it's kind of just, basically made it dark for a reason. We were kind of going through a lot during the time, just like everybody else during the pandemic. Kind of just like a lot of dark shit went down, and that's kind of just what happened.
We kind of made it as like a way to tell a story without really having like a character that we're telling a story about, like intentionally trying to make it so that anybody could access it or like relate it to what they're experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of bands that have characters that they portray in their music, whether it's like a deathcore band like Carnifex or a power metal band like Unleash the Archers. But I do feel like that sometimes a character is sort of limiting in a way where sometimes it doesn't feel like that character is present. So it feels like that this is more of a setting, more so than a character.
Yeah, or just like a state of mind. And I agree with like, it's like, well, I can't relate to that guy. Like, I don't know. Like.
Yeah. Now, with 8-string guitars, so I do want to ask, how many strings is the next album going to have? I know it's a joke question, but it is like a satire question I have, because I've noticed bands are getting heavier and heavier, and they're having more and more strings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this last one was actually supposed to be drop D, like double drop D. And we kind of chickened out and went back to drop E. It's kind of hard to, keep the guitar in tune if you don't have an Evertune, if you're down to like drop D. Yeah. Maybe the next one we'll revisit that.
You ever planning on incorporating the Jared Dines guitar in a way?
The Mountain Dew guitar?
Yeah, or like, I just call it a harp at this point. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took us a while even to switch from 7-string guitars. Like that's what By the Thousands started on, was sevens, and like an intense love for Meshuggah and wanting to learn Meshuggah songs was the reason that I got an 8-string guitar, and then it was just kind of game over after that. So, in terms of 9-string, I've never really recorded with a 9-string or had the opportunity to play around with one, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't write it off after my experience of like switching from 7 to 8. Like it might be really, really cool, but
I mean, that would be very cool. I just mark my words, this is going to happen with a lot of. We're going to see a lot of older bands say, back in my day, we only had 6 strings. You kids with your fucking 27 strings or something like that, right?
Yeah.
you will play drop C and you will like it.
Hey, you know what? If the music sounds good, that's what matters most of all, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep. Now, there are 3 albums in the BTT catalog, and next year is going to mark 10 years since Connect, the first BTT album. What was the sort of thought process behind the making of that album, and how would you say the evolution has progressed since then?
So Connect was the goal in mind for Connect was like, how difficult can we write these riffs, and how challenging can we make it physically for us to perform these live so that it's impressive to watch, and what's the fastest tempo that we could write at. Those were both like legitimate questions that we were asking constantly when we were writing that album. Most of those songs, not most, some of those songs were written with our first drummer, Matt Palazzo, and he's just absolutely incredible as a drummer. He plays drums in Aegean and has played drums for Black Dahlia Murder. He was slated to be touring with Oceano this year. We love Matt. He's amazing. But you can definitely hear his instrumental influence there, like very fast, very technical blast beats, death metal drumming. So it was just like, well, let's write the most impressive, heavy, technical metal album that we can with Connect. And that's kind of what you hear with like the fast tempo songs and like kind of the shreddy aspect of that record.
Would you say that when you would go on to Visions of Inner Depth and so on, that like it wasn't about playing as fast or heavy as you can, but more or less let's try to experiment a little bit more and was it almost kind of like saying to yourself, we don't have to make it continuously heavy all the time?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And you know, we had done some touring at that point on the songs for Connect, and we got to experience playing shows with other bands that were, you know, maybe less technical or fast, but then seeing the reaction that they get from the crowds, and it kind of made us all go like, dang, like let's reassess what we're doing here. Because like people have, you know, given us positive feedback on the songs on Connect, but we were kind of like ready to feel a change and write some tunes that made people move in a different way, you know?
Yeah, because I've always thought that maybe like BTT's music is a little bit more on the experimental side in a way, especially with bands that have, you know, the heavy ass riffs, but also the progressive elements that are clearly incorporated on here as well. Is trying new things almost just as much part of the songwriting process as writing riffs and writing vocals and all that?
I would say so. Yeah. Like this last record and Dead Matter, we kind of, you know, I've been listening to a ton of like industrial stuff and bands like us that are kind of incorporating that, and that's kind of reared its head on the records.
Yeah, and then you realize there's a band that I think you all would like if you haven't checked them out. I'll plug them here, called The Design Abstract, and they have a interlude track that's straight up teetering on being EDM, and it works like just great with their deathcore style sound.
Very nice.
That's super cool.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. The Design Abstract Technotheism is the album. Shout them out as well. Now, with this EP, because when you have Curse to The Flood to Deadweight to Comatose, I mean, it is an EP, but there's 6 songs on it. If you made these songs just relatively longer, it almost could have been a full-length album. Am I wrong by that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, add a song or two, and it would have definitely been a full length.
Yeah. So, little debate. What is the threshold? What is the EP threshold, you would say, that before it just becomes an album?
Dude, I think 7 tracks is an EP, and I think 8 would be a full length.
Okay.
Depending on time.
I would have to agree. I think that's a pretty good number. 7. I think 7 is like the highest extent of what would constitute an EP, but I think you could still get away, depending on like what you said, the length of the songs.
Yeah, because there are prog bands will just put out one song on the album, but it's like an hour and a half long. So
Yeah.
now, when it comes to both being guitar players, is it better if both of you really are on the same page technically and emotionally when it comes to writing riffs together and writing solos, or is it better that you both are kind of like in your own separate worlds in a way?
I think a little bit of both, honestly. Like, and I feel like we've always kind of been like teetering between both. Like sometimes we're just like really in the same mindset together and we're in the same room, and we've had some like really sick riffs and songs that have manifested that way. But I think that you can't really deny like having two different headspaces. It's going to allow for like different creative elements in the music. And oftentimes we do write separate, and then we'll share our music together, and then you can kind of allow the other one time to get themselves in the headspace that you were for the track that you sent, you know?
When it comes to writing the solos too, because I've always said that guitar solos are very much like vocals in a way, as they use melody to convey a certain emotion. And is it better if there is background music before, like, do you all find it easier to come up with solos when there's an underlying melody already there, or do you sometimes have a whole solo already written and can write around that?
I've never written that way. Like with the solo first, it's always been, what does the song need? Like, how do I serve the song?
How do you know when it's going to fit? If you have like a stockpile of different riffs, how do you know when it's going to fit over each other?
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
I don't really know if you ever do. Like at least if we or I ever do. Like it's so much experimentation when we're doing these songs, and we'll try out multiple different like riffs following a riff. It's like, okay, I know I really like this one, and like sometimes we'll even be playing with like the click track going, and then it'll just be the click after the riff, and it's just like, well, what am I feeling? What feels the most natural here? And it'll try A, B, different riffs at the end. And
yeah,
but
because with all of these bands that have this sort of like technical and progressive sort of roots behind it, like I always just found it amazing because there's so many different riffs, so many different, like there's such a strong composition behind all of it. How are you able to kind of like, it's almost kind of like, is it almost kind of like a sandbox freedom in a way? Or I've always thought that maybe it's best if you don't have anything and you're only working on one thing at a time.
Yeah, I think that's easiest. Yeah.
In order to get inspired to write riffs, to get that creative energy, does it just come out of the blue, or do you kind of have to like seek it out?
I think it's both.
it is.
Sometimes you'll just like randomly have an idea in your head and you'll, race to the computer to make it happen. But a lot of the times you just, you don't get inspired unless you're like kind of already sitting there. You kind of force it.
I've had songs where like I'm driving in my car, and like I'll have a riff come in my head, and I'm like, oh my god, don't lose it, and I'll pull my phone out and record myself like going bum ba da dun da dun dun da 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 dun da da, like just mouthing the riff, so that when I get home I can like reference that and be like, okay, what were you thinking about right there? Yeah. Other times I will be sitting down and it will be like a grind. Like I gotta get this rhythm down. Like I got 8 bars here and I want to finish it out. So it's just like both of those are like very creative ways at like approaching, but like very, very different. And I would say like the sitting there grinding part, like sometimes feels a little bit more forced, but like often yields like really sick tracks.
Definitely. And I want to ask you this too. So I was interviewing a bunch of post-hardcore bands and like deathcore bands that are like very, when they're going on stage, they're fucking throwing down super hard. And I would ask them, how do you bring that live energy onto the album in a studio when it's more of a confined like space and it's more, static and whatnot? But I feel like with the music, with your technical proficiency, it's almost kind of the opposite, where like I could tell just by looking at your setup in the background, and you're not the only band that falls into the sort of like progressive category that has those professional setups, but like, you need to execute that technical proficiency in a great setting, no distractions, very like a static environment almost works, I feel like, for your style. But then you have to execute that stuff live where you're face to face with the crowd, you're on stage in a sweaty ass venue where anything could happen at any moment. How do you sort of, it has to be a completely separate mindset when you're playing live versus playing on the album, right?
Oh yeah.
Very much so. However, like I would say writing, like going back to what we were talking about with Connect, like those songs, we had no regard for like how difficult is this. We had regard in like, let's write the hardest parts, but weren't thinking about like, well, are you going to physically be able to do this easily every night or like accurately every night? And so we definitely think about that now in the studio. It's like, well, how is it going to be to play this song? Like, how hard can I headbang during this part? Like, is this tempo one that lends itself to me moving around here while I'm like nailing this riff? So like that's kind of always like in frame of thought of like, well, what are we doing with this riff here?
How do you know when you're finished with a song?
That's a good point.
When everybody's hyped on it and sending the thumbs up in the chat, or
Yeah.
like, you know, the craziest gifts that they can about.
When it hits 3 minutes.
Yeah.
When- when it hits, rest in peace. But Trevor from Black Dahlia gave me the same exact answer. Yeah, you know, he gave me like, you know, you have to feel it and, you know, understand that, but it's usually just 3 minutes. Like, so that's perfect. In terms of like the style that you would call BTT, because like I see progressive elements, I see metalcore elements, I do see like a lot of different elements behind. You know, I can't pigeonhole you in just one on the periodic table of subgenres, if you will. So when it comes to having an experimental style, how does, and I think this is good for other bands to hear, how do you sort of market yourself in a way when you do have multiple styles and multiple fan bases you could appeal to?
Good question. I mean, a lot of our fans are just musicians, you know, many of them. Marketing, I think that's kind of always been tough for us, actually.
Yeah.
We're just five dudes that want to play our instruments, but so yeah, the marketing has been tricky, and like we've always just written the music that we listen to, you know, like there is some regard for like, well, like we've toured with a lot of deathcore bands, and we've also toured with like some really great melodic like bands, and it's super interesting, like kind of always being the outlier on those bills, because like we're heavier than like the melodic bands, but like we're not quite as heavy as the deathcore bands. So I don't know, like we've just always been like, we're going to write what we like because we're good at writing it and like listening to the songs that we write. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think you definitely have the appeal where like I could see you tour with like a Lorna Shore, I could see you tour with the Between the Buried and Me, but I could see you tour with like a Meshuggah, or maybe even like an Animals as Leaders right after that. I think you do have that multi appeal, if you will.
That's really cool. Thank you, man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. So before we go, I want to thank you both so much for your time today. Is there just anything else with By the Thousands we could be expecting with the release of this new EP in terms of tours, or what else we could be expecting for the near future?
We do have some exciting stuff coming up in regards of shows. We got 3 shows this weekend with Oceano, and then we got a home show April 12th at Amsterdam St. Paul with Reflections. We have plenty of songs that we're sitting on cooking in the works, and we work on them in this room. So we got like a bunch of new stuff slated to come out this year.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Everybody, we are here with By the Thousands, the Descent EP. Be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.